Hi, everyone. Today, I want to share a story that's been on my mind for a while. This isn't something easy to talk about, but sometimes life throws you curveballs that leave you questioning everything. This story is about a connection I never expected to find with someone so close, my neighbor across the hall. It started as a simple, innocent encounter, but it became something much deeper, something that shook my entire world. Let me set the stage. I've been married to Tom for 8 years. At first, we were everything to each other's best friend, support partner. But over time, things started to change. Life, routine, responsibilities. Somehow they all built up, and our relationship began to feel like it was running on autopilot. Conversations became shorter, our affection felt more like habit than genuine warmth. And even though we shared the same space, it was as if an invisible wall had grown between us. I felt like I was fading into the background, becoming invisible in my own life. That's when I met Mark, my neighbor across the hall. He had moved in about a year ago, but we'd only exchanged brief hellos in passing. I never thought much of it until one evening, something changed. It was late, and I was fumbling with my bags as I came home from work, feeling completely drained. I looked up, and there he was, struggling to balance a large box in his arms while trying to open his door. I watched him for a moment, debating whether I should offer to help. "Need a hand?" I finally asked, smiling, hoping I didn't look too exhausted. He looked up and smiled, a genuine smile that somehow lit up the entire hallway. "I'd appreciate it," he replied, laughing as he adjusted his grip on the box. As we maneuvered the box through his door, we exchanged the usual pleasantries. But then something strange happened. He invited me in for a quick coffee to thank me for my help. It was such a small gesture, and yet, for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to say no. I hadn't realized just how lonely I felt until that moment, and a part of me longed for a simple, genuine connection. Inside, his apartment was cozy, filled with books and paintings. It felt warm, inviting, a sharp contrast to the sterile, silent environment I'd become used to at home. We sat down with our cups of coffee, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about work, hobbies, even the quirks of our apartment building. I found myself laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in what felt like forever. He had a way of listening, of engaging, that made me feel truly seen. As days passed, our paths started crossing more often. It was almost as if fate was nudging us together. I'd see him in the elevator, or he'd pass by as I was checking the mail, and each time he'd stop to chat, his warm smile making my heart flutter in a way I hadn't felt in years. I tried to ignore it, to dismiss the feelings as nothing more than friendly attraction. But they were there, growing stronger with each encounter. One evening, after another long, tiring day, I came home to find a note slipped under my door. It was from Mark, inviting me over for dinner. I hesitated, my heart racing as I read the words over and over. I knew it was risky, that accepting the invitation could lead to something I wasn't ready to confront. But a part of me couldn't resist. I craved that connection, that feeling of being valued and appreciated, if only for a few hours. That night, I dressed with a little more care than usual, choosing a simple yet flattering dress. As I walked across the hall to his apartment, a mix of excitement and guilt churned in my stomach. When he opened the door, he greeted me with that same warm smile, and for a moment, all my worries faded away. Dinner was simple yet perfect. Pasta with a glass of wine. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing effortlessly as we shared pieces of ourselves we hadn't shared with anyone else. He told me about his childhood, his dreams, his struggles, and I found myself opening up about my own life, my marriage, the loneliness I'd felt. His empathy was disarming. He listened without judgment, offering a kind of understanding that felt foreign yet comforting. As the night wore on, a quiet tension began to build between us. We both felt it. The unspoken pull, the magnetic connection that had been simmering beneath the surface all along. There was a moment of silence, our eyes meeting, and suddenly we were leaning in, drawn together by a force neither of us could resist. Our kiss was soft at first, hesitant, as if testing the boundaries of this new and unexpected closeness. But as it deepened, so did the emotions I had been holding back. I felt alive, truly alive, in a way I hadn't felt in years. The hours slipped away, and before I knew it, morning light was peeking through the windows. As I left his apartment, my heart was a jumble of emotions: guilt, exhilaration, confusion. I knew what had happened couldn't be undone, but I also couldn't bring myself to regret it. That night had reminded me of something essential: that I deserved to feel loved, valued, and truly connected. In the days that followed, Mark and I kept our distance, exchanging only polite smiles in passing. We both knew the risks, the complexity of the situation. And yet, I couldn't shake the memory of our time together, the way he'd made me feel like I mattered, like I was seen. Back home, Tom sensed something was off. He'd ask if I was okay, if there was something on my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. I felt trapped, torn between the comfort of my marriage and the yearning for the connection I'd found with Mark. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I realized I couldn't continue living this way, caught between two worlds. My encounter with Mark had been a wake-up call, a reminder that love and connection couldn't thrive in silence and routine. I knew I needed to confront the issues in my marriage, to have an honest conversation with Tom about the loneliness I'd felt, about the distance that had grown between us. The next day, I sat down with Tom and took a deep breath, gathering the courage to speak my truth. I didn't tell him about Mark, but I did share the emptiness I'd been feeling, the disconnect that had crept into our lives. It was one of the hardest conversations I'd ever had, filled with raw emotions and vulnerability. But for the first time in years, it felt like we were truly communicating, breaking down the walls that had kept us apart. In the weeks that followed, Tom and I committed to rebuilding our marriage. We started going to counseling, making time for each other, rediscovering the parts of ourselves we'd neglected. Slowly, we began to rekindle the love and connection that had once been the foundation of our relationship. Looking back, my encounter with Mark was a turning point. It forced me to confront the reality of my life, to question what I wanted and needed. While my time with Mark may have been brief, it was a reminder that I deserved to be valued, appreciated, and truly loved. I'll always remember the connection we shared and the impact it had on me, even if it was fleeting. Thank you for listening to my story. Life is rarely perfect, and sometimes we find ourselves making choices that we don't fully understand. But it's through these experiences that we learn, grow, and ultimately, find our path. If you've ever felt lost or disconnected, know that you're not alone. We all deserve to be seen, to be loved, to be happy. Until next time, take care of yourselves.